Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons and love are told. Go ahead and like, share with your friends and subscribe. My name is Clarissa, and for the longest time, I thought I had finally found my safe haven in Ethan. He was kind, attentive and supportive, or at least, that was what I believed when we first began dating. We had been together for almost 4 years, and when he proposed, I was certain I was stepping into the life I always dreamed of. We bought a small house together in a quiet suburban neighborhood, where I thought we would begin building our new chapter. But that dream started to crack the day his mother, Margaret, decided to announce her intentions. It happened on an ordinary Sunday dinner at her place. She sat across from me, her voice calm but with a certainty that left no room for argument. "After you two get married, I'll just move in with you for a few months. Just until I settle some of my affairs. It'll be easier that way." I blinked at her words, frozen, waiting for Ethan to laugh or at least clarify that she was joking. But he just kept cutting into his roast chicken, not meeting my eyes. I managed a smile, though my insides were boiling. "Oh, I didn't know we'd made that arrangement," I said, trying to keep my voice light. Margaret leaned back in her chair, folding her arms like a queen settling into her throne. "Well, of course you didn't. I hadn't told you yet. But it only makes sense. You'll have the space, and I won't be alone while transitioning." She said it as though my home was a spare room at a hotel she had already booked. I wanted to scream, but instead, I looked at Ethan. He finally glanced at me and offered one of his nervous smiles. "We can talk about it later," he whispered, as though that would calm me. But the damage was already done. That night, when we returned home, I confronted him. "Ethan, why didn't you say anything? This is our home. She can't just decide to move in." He rubbed his neck, looking like a boy caught sneaking out past curfew. "She won't stay long. It's just Margaret. You know how she is. It's easier to let her have her way than to make a fuss." That sentence rang in my ears. Easier to let her have her way. It wasn't the first time he had said it. Margaret had a habit of imposing herself on our lives. There was the time she stayed with us for 3 weeks instead of the 3 days she promised, reorganizing my kitchen because she thought my system was inefficient. Or the time she showed up uninvited while Ethan was at work, deciding she would repaint our guest room because she hated the color. Each time Ethan shrugged it off. Each time I swallowed my discomfort because I thought maybe it wasn't worth fighting over. But now she wasn't asking to stay a week or meddle with my curtains. She was planning to move in. The thought of waking up every day with Margaret's criticisms and constant presence hanging over me filled me with dread. Over the next few days, I tried to reason with Ethan. I explained how much I valued our privacy, how I wanted to begin our marriage as just the two of us. But each time he brushed me off. "She's my mom, Clarissa. She's family. She won't be a problem." Except I knew she would. Margaret thrived on control. Already, she was dropping hints in casual conversation about how she would help us manage our household. At a family brunch, she even told her sisters, "I'll be moving in with Ethan and Clarissa. They'll love having me there." They all nodded approvingly, while I sat frozen, my fork halfway to my mouth. I decided I couldn't keep quiet any longer. One evening, Margaret brought it up again while Ethan and I were visiting. She started listing the furniture she wanted to bring into our house. "My mahogany dresser will fit perfectly in the upstairs hallway. I'll put my tea set in the kitchen display. It'll be cozy." I cut her off. My voice was calm but sharp, like the edge of a knife. "Margaret, you are not moving into our house." The silence that followed was deafening. Her mouth fell open, her face paling as though I had just slapped her. Ethan stared at me in horror. "Clarissa," he hissed. But I didn't stop. "This is our home. Our space. I respect you, but you can't just decide to live with us. That's not happening." Margaret's hands trembled as she set her teacup down. Her voice broke as she said, "I can't believe you would treat me this way. After everything I've done for Ethan. After everything I've done for you." Her eyes shimmered with tears, and suddenly, I was the villain. Ethan rushed to her side, holding her hand like she was the one who had been wronged. "Mom, don't cry. Clarissa didn't mean it like that." But I did mean it. Every word. The next day, I I woke up to a flood of messages in a family group chat I had barely spoken in. Margaret had already told everyone about her plans to move in and how I had cruelly denied her. Cousins, uncles, even people I barely knew sent me long paragraphs about how family should stick together, how Margaret deserved comfort in her old age, how I was being selfish. I could have stayed silent. I could have let them paint me as the heartless fiancé, but I had reached my limit. So I typed back. Just to be clear, Margaret will not be moving in with us. That was never agreed upon and it's not happening. The chat exploded. People sent angry emojis, others typed walls of text defending Margaret, and Ethan stayed silent. Completely silent. His silence cut deeper than their words. That night I asked him, "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you defend me?" He sighed. "Because it's easier this way. She'll calm down eventually." But she didn't calm down. She only grew bolder, acting like my refusal was just a temporary obstacle she would eventually wear down. She called Ethan constantly, guilt-tripping him with her sobs and complaints. She even started packing her things, sending Ethan pictures of her boxed-up china and books. I watched him fold under her pressure, and for the first time, I realized the problem wasn't just Margaret. It was Ethan too. I had thought Margaret's words at that dinner were bold, but nothing could have prepared me for the audacity she displayed when she showed up at my doorstep with 2 massive suitcases and a smug look on her face. It was a Thursday evening, one of those slow days when I came home from work longing for nothing more than a quiet shower and a glass of wine. I pulled into the driveway, noticed an unfamiliar cab parked outside, and my stomach dropped. Standing on the front porch was Margaret, dressed in a pale pink cardigan, tapping her foot impatiently beside her luggage. My heart raced as I climbed the steps. "Margaret, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice already heavy with dread. She smiled as though this was the most natural thing in the world. "Moving in, of course. Ethan said you'd come around eventually. I figured it was better to get settled before the wedding rush." She picked up one of her bags, attempting to push past me into the house. I blocked the doorway with both hands on the frame. "No. Absolutely not." Her smile faltered. "Clarissa, don't be ridiculous. I can't keep living alone in that old place. I've already told the family. Everyone knows I'm moving in. You wouldn't embarrass me like this." But I stood my ground. "I told you before, you're not moving into this house. Not now, not later. This is between Ethan and me. You can't just decide for us." She gasped, her hand flying to her chest, and for a moment I thought she might faint right there on the porch. Then she let out a dramatic sob, one loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "How dare you speak to me like this? After everything I've sacrificed for Ethan, this is the thanks I get." The door creaked behind me, and Ethan appeared, rubbing his eyes as though the scene unfolding in front of him was merely inconvenient rather than catastrophic. "Clarissa," he muttered, "don't do this in front of her. Just let her in. We'll figure it out later." The fury that boiled inside me at that moment was indescribable.
"No, Ethan.
We won't figure it out later. There's nothing to figure out. She is not living here." Margaret clutched his arm, wailing. "Do you hear the way she talks to me? Your fiancée is cruel, Ethan. She wants to keep us apart." Ethan looked torn, his gaze flicking between us like a lost child. But instead of backing me up, he whispered, "Maybe just for a little while. Until she gets back on her feet?" That was it. That was the exact moment something inside me snapped. I turned to him with eyes burning. "Do you even hear yourself? This isn't about helping her for a little while. This is about boundaries you refused to set." Neighbors had begun peeking through their curtains. The humiliation of it all seared into my skin as Margaret cried louder, accusing me of destroying the family. Finally, with my voice shaking but firm, I said, "Margaret, take your bags and go. If you refuse, I'll call a cab for you myself." The look of outrage on her face could have curdled milk. Ethan's jaw tightened, his disappointment written all over his features, not for his mother's manipulations, but for my refusal to submit. He dragged the suitcases back toward the cab driver who had been waiting awkwardly by the car. Margaret's sobs echoed through the night as she climbed into the back seat, glaring at me through the window as though I had personally shattered her life. When Ethan came back inside, he slammed the door and turned to me. You humiliated her. In front of the neighbors. In front of everyone. Was that necessary? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She showed up with suitcases, Ethan. She tried to move into our house without my consent. And you're upset with me for not letting her. He rubbed his temples. You could have handled it more delicately. That night we barely spoke. He slept on the couch and I lay awake in our bed staring at the ceiling. The silence between us was no longer a silence of peace. It was the silence of a canyon widening by the hour. 2 days later, we were invited to a family barbecue at Margaret's house. I wanted to refuse, but Ethan insisted. It'll blow over if we just show up, he said. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The barbecue was a trap from the moment I stepped into the backyard. Margaret's relatives, her cousins, and her friends gathered like a jury waiting to deliver their verdict. As I greeted people, I heard the whispers, the muffled laughter, the words selfish and controlling floating through the air like smoke. During dinner, Margaret sat proudly at the head of the table, wearing an expression of martyrdom. She spoke loudly about how some people didn't understand the meaning of family, how she was being cast aside after giving her whole life to her son. Every remark was a dagger pointed in my direction. Finally, I put down my fork, my hands trembling but steady in my resolve. Margaret, let's stop pretending. You told everyone you were moving into our house without asking either of us. That's not family, that's control. And I won't live under control. The table went quiet. All eyes turned to Ethan. This was the moment he should have stood by me. This was the moment he should have spoken the truth. But instead he dropped his gaze, fumbled with his napkin and said nothing. Margaret seized the silence like a crown. See? Even Ethan doesn't support you. You're the outsider here, Clarissa. Maybe you're the wrong fit for this family after all. Her words hung in the humid summer air, heavy and poisonous. I pushed back my chair and stood. If Ethan can't stand with me, then maybe you're right. Maybe I don't belong here. I left the barbecue without looking back. Ethan didn't follow me home that night. He stayed at his mother's. The bed was colder than it had ever been, and the quiet of the house screamed louder than any argument could. Days passed without a word from him. On the 11th day, an email arrived not from Ethan, but from Margaret. Attached was a detailed transition plan, outlining how she would phase into our household after the wedding. It included where her furniture would go, what room she would occupy, and how she would contribute by supervising groceries and household chores. It was written as though I didn't exist. I stared at the document for what felt like hours, my stomach twisting with disgust. That was when the realization sank in. The problem wasn't only Margaret. The problem was Ethan's silence, his inability to draw a line, his willingness to let me drown under his mother's shadow. I wasn't fighting just her. I was fighting the man I thought would be my husband. And suddenly, the engagement ring on my finger felt like a chain I needed to break. The morning after reading Margaret's so-called transition plan, I woke up with an unusual calmness inside me. It was the kind of clarity that only comes after you've spent too long drowning in confusion. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ring on my finger. It glittered under the sunlight streaming through the blinds, but instead of love, all I could see in that sparkle was the weight of compromise. Compromise that had eaten away at my voice, my peace, and my dignity. I didn't text Ethan to ask where he had been for the last 11 nights. I didn't beg him to come back. I didn't even want answers anymore. I wanted freedom. That evening I packed the engagement ring in its velvet box, placed it neatly on the dining table, and wrote him a short note. I won't live in a triangle. I deserve a partner, not a referee. When Ethan came home the next morning, I was already dressed with my suitcase by the door. He looked exhausted, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw unshaven. Clarissa, what are you doing? I held up the ring box. I can't marry you, Ethan. I love you, but you've made it clear that I'll never come first. Your silence speaks louder than words. He stepped closer, desperation in his tone. Wait, don't do this. I'll talk to her. I'll set boundaries. Just give me a little more time. Tears stung my eyes, but I shook my head. You've had years to set boundaries. Years to prove that you can choose me without feeling like you're betraying her. But every single time, you chose silence. And silence is still a choice. Margaret must have sensed something was happening because within an hour she arrived at the house, her heels clicking against the driveway like a countdown. She walked in without knocking, her eyes darting from Ethan to the suitcase beside me. "What's going on here?" she demanded. I turned to her, my voice steady for the first time in months. "What's going on is that I'm leaving. This house, this engagement, this circus of manipulation. You can have your son, Margaret. But you won't have me." Her face twisted in triumph for a split second before softening into feigned sorrow. "Clarissa, don't be dramatic. Ethan needs both of us. You can't just abandon him." I smiled bitterly. "I'm not abandoning him. I'm giving him exactly what he's been too afraid to choose, you." I rolled my suitcase out the door while Ethan stood frozen, Margaret's hand clutching his arm like a leash. And in that moment, the weight that had pressed on my chest for so long lifted. The air felt lighter. My lungs finally filled completely. Over the next few weeks, I sold my half of the house to Ethan. Friends tried to convince me to reconsider, to give him another chance, but I knew there was nothing left to reconsider. You can't build a marriage on a foundation of silence and avoidance. Margaret had been bold, yes, but Ethan had been complicit, and that was the deal breaker. With the money from my share, I booked myself a solo trip to Italy. I needed distance not just from Ethan and Margaret, but from the entire life I had nearly trapped myself in. The moment I arrived in Florence, I felt reborn. I wandered through cobblestone streets lined with centuries-old architecture, tasting gelato on hot afternoons and sipping espresso in tiny cafes, where no one knew my name. For the first time in years, I wasn't somebody's fiancé, or somebody's daughter-in-law-to-be, or somebody's problem to manage. I was just Clarissa. One evening as the sun dipped behind the terracotta rooftops, I sat on the steps of Piazzale Michelangelo, watching the city bathe in gold. Around me tourists laughed, lovers held hands, musicians played violins, but inside I was quiet. Not the silence of neglect, not the silence of unspoken words, but the silence of peace. I thought about Ethan. I thought about the life we could have had if he had been strong enough to stand beside me instead of behind his mother. And then with a deep breath I let it go. Some men never learn to cut the umbilical cord, and some women are better off not trying to do it for them. Months passed, and I received an occasional update from mutual friends. Ethan had indeed let Margaret move into the house. She reorganized every corner of it, just as I had predicted. He looked tired, older somehow, like the weight of trying to keep her happy had already drained him. But that was no longer my battle. That was the life he chose and I had chosen mine. I spent my days in Italy exploring new cities, Venice, Rome, Amalfi, and with every train ride, I shed a little more of the bitterness that Margaret had planted in me. I learned to cook authentic pasta in a small Tuscan village. I painted on the cliffs of Cinque Terre. I danced barefoot at a summer festival where strangers became friends under strings of lights. And slowly I began to smile without forcing it. When I returned home months later, I wasn't the same woman who had stood on that porch blocking Margaret's suitcases. I was stronger, freer, more certain of my worth. I no longer craved Ethan's validation, nor did I resent Margaret's cruelty. I had simply outgrown them both. Looking back, I see now that the real revenge wasn't slamming doors or shouting in family group chats. The real revenge was reclaiming my peace, walking away, choosing myself. Because nothing unsettles those who thrive on control more than realizing they no longer have power over you. So to anyone listening who finds themselves caught in a similar triangle, let me tell you this. Love should never come with strings attached to someone else's control. If your partner cannot stand beside you, then you are better off standing alone. Alone but free. Alone but whole. And here's the lesson I carried with me through cobblestone streets and golden sunsets. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to play the game entirely.
Moral lesson.
Life has a way of testing the boundaries we set, and people will often push as far as we allow them. My story isn't just about a mother-in-law who overstepped. It's about the quiet erosion that happens when someone you love refuses to defend you. The truth is, boundaries aren't walls meant to divide. They are doors that protect the sanctuary of our hearts. When a partner cannot stand firmly at that door with you, the sanctuary becomes exposed to storms. Walking away wasn't easy. It felt like tearing off a piece of my own skin. But sometimes pain is necessary for healing. And healing, as I found under Italian skies, is sweeter when it's chosen for yourself, not borrowed from someone else's promises. So to you listening now, never apologize for demanding respect, for protecting your peace, or for saying no when someone tries to rewrite your life without your consent. The greatest revenge is not anger, it's peace. And the G to the channel, share it with friends, and comment below what lessons spoke to your heart.